What's going on, everyone? My name is Ben Baby. I cover the Cincinnati Bengals for ESPN's NFL Nation. And hopefully by now you've hit that like button, you subscribed, and you followed along the last few weeks as we talked about this Bengals offense. And last week we said, is Joe Burrow ready to take off? Is his offense ready to take off? And if you watch that game against the Atlanta Falcons last week, boy, you definitely saw that those receivers and that offense in general took off. They picked up right where they were in the previous week in that win over the New Orleans Saints. But what I really want to talk about in this week's video are those three wide receivers that a lot of people thought might be one of the best trios in the NFL. That's Ja'Marr Chase, that's T. Higgins, that's Tyler Boyd. And those three guys, and when you add in Burrow, when you add in Joe Mixon, the running back, Hayden Hurst, their new tight end, a lot of people said this could be one of the best offenses in the league on paper. And through the first 5 weeks of the season, it didn't really feel like that was the case. I mean, you looked at it, I watched it, I saw a lot of clunky football, a lot of bad football, a lot of offensive slog, for lack of a better phrase. But the last 2 weeks, that thing has been zipping. You've seen Burrow finding his groove. 3 months after that emergency appendectomy, he's starting to look like the guy that finished the 2021 season and was playing like one of the NFL's best quarterbacks. And if you're Burrow, you've got to be happy. And if you're Zach Taylor, the head coach and play caller, you've got to be even happier because you look at the options at your disposal and what they can do. And that was on full display in that game against the Falcons. You had Ja'Marr Chase going over 100 yards. You had Tyler Boyd going over 100 yards. T. Higgins was 7 yards shy of hitting that 100-yard mark. And you'd have three receivers going over 100. And Higgins, after the game, knows, he was telling Joe Burrow in the huddle, he knew what it was at. He saw it on the board. He saw that he just needed 7 more yards. He thought he came close to getting it. But even if he didn't hit that metric, what we saw is that this definitely can be one of the best trios in the league, if not the best trio. Now, we want to be very clear. We don't want to overreact to a couple of good performances because, like we said, there were a lot of stretches early in the season where it didn't look like it has. And we know that in the NFL, things can change really quickly. I'm about to go from hater account to homer account. We want to find that balance somewhere in the middle. But you look at any number you want, and the good folks at ESPN Stats and Info, I mean, I can find any metric under the sun with their help. If I want to find what Joe Burrow or Ja'Marr Chase, how many receiving yards that Ja'Marr has on a Monday when the Mercury's in retrograde, I probably can find that information. And when you look at what they've done, let's look at some basic numbers. Right now, you have all three guys ranking in the top 20 in receiving yards, and Tyler and T had the exact same amount, I believe 455. Ja'Marr ranks 6th in the NFL. But when you look at the past 5 weeks, so you take away that 0-2 start, they're even better. I mean, you go look at that, and they are a very, very productive unit. And the key for a lot of this might be, I mean, you can pick your poison because, early in the season, we were talking about a lot of those teams playing cover 2 defenses or those 2 high shells. And the Bengals knew they were going to get a ton of that, where you have those 2 safeties sitting at the top. They want to take away those explosive plays. And what I found interesting is that in the first play that the Bengals had against New Orleans and against Atlanta, they ran a variation of the same route. And, I don't want to get too into the X's and O's, and I'm probably not the best person to speak on all the intricate details. But when you look at it, you saw that it was quick, short routes to Tyler Boyd up the seam. And immediately, you saw that there was going to be an emphasis on finding Boyd early on quick routes and then see what you can get later on. And against New Orleans, we looked at the numbers from NFL Next Gen Stats, and Burrow was very content to take all those yards underneath. We didn't see him really push the ball for more than 10 air yards. And we talked about that in last week's video. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't done that. But this week, this is the Burrow that we saw throughout, when in 2021, when things were really humming. And, I asked Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins, I said, when did you know that Burrow was going to be humming like he did? And he said that first throw to Tyler Boyd. Now, the question is, was it the first reception that we just talked about, or was it the touchdown reception where Boyd caught a 60-yard pass and he went down, the middle of the field and really set the tone for what that game was going to be like? And so, T. Higgins was talking about how wide open how wide open Tyler Boyd was. He said he was booty butt naked. And I said, at first he said butt naked. I just died laughing. And then, there was another rider. We were standing right there. And T was like, what's so funny? What do you mean? He was booty butt naked. He was wide open. And you go look at it. He was wide open. But I think what's interesting when you go look at Tyler Boyd's touchdown, that first one, is that when you go look at the route, they were playing cover 2, and you had 3 vertical routes. You had Jamar, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins all running up the field. And I know when you'll go back and you'll say, oh, the safety fell, and that's why Tyler was booty butt naked, wide open. But it's not just that simple. I mean, if you go back and look, even if the safety doesn't fall, when you look at the play design, you have the safety trying to figure out who he's going to take. Is he going to take T. Higgins, who's going up the right sideline, or is he going to take Tyler Boyd going up the middle? And I'd venture to guess that even if the defender doesn't fall, Tyler is getting open and he's going to get that ball, and it's probably going to be a touchdown. And we saw them really cook throughout the course of that game. You saw the Bengals go in a lot of 11 personnel, which they really like to do. You saw them going shotgun. You saw them going empty formations where they don't have a running back in the backfield. And that tells me how good Zach Taylor feels about this offense, how much confidence Joe Burrow's playing with. Because in order to play that way, you've got to know that your receivers are going to get open, your quarterback's going to make the right reads, and your offensive line is going to hold up in pass protection. And when we talked to Zach Taylor, after the game and on Monday as well, he made sure that he brought up the pass protection and how good that was over the course of the game. And really over the last couple of weeks, that chemistry is starting to be evident as you watch them throughout the course of a game. You're seeing those 4 new starters that joined left tackle Jonah Williams. They're starting to kind of find that rhythm, and Joe Burrow is getting a lot of clean pockets. Now, granted, the pass rush over the last couple of weeks probably could be a little bit better, but I don't think you can take a whole lot away from how good the Bengals have played up front. So that means he's got a lot of clean pockets. And Tyler Boyd said it best when I asked him after the game. He said that when you got a quarterback who can find the right receiver when it's open, there's really not a defense you can play to stop them. And the Bengals have always felt that way. And I've always felt like when a team lines up in 11 personnel, they line up in empty, they're basically declaring war on the opposing team. They're saying, we're going to go out. This is what we're going to do. Why don't you try to stop us? And it's a lot different of offensive, the way that I see this offense and how they feel philosophically is a lot different than they were, the first 5 weeks of the season. I mean, heck, you go look at how much they've been in shotgun the last couple of weeks. It's been completely different. I mean, the numbers you're talking about, upwards of around 40 percentage points difference, from somewhere where they were around 48% first 5 weeks when they were in shotgun to now that number's somewhere around 80%, if not a little bit higher. And so that shows you kind of the confidence they have and how well this offense has been clicking, and you're letting Joe Burrow do what Joe Burrow does best. He's able to see the whole field. He's able to stand back there, make the right reads. And if you go back and you remember, he had that game against Pittsburgh in week 1. He had a lot of interceptions. He was trying to push the ball downfield. And for whatever reason, windows that he thought he could get to, he wasn't able to get there. And, some of that might be because of the appendectomy. And it's something where when he came back from that, that happened right before training camp, he talked about how there was going to be zero effect and he felt like he was completely back to 100%. But realistically, you got to remember that he lost a lot of weight, and he didn't tell us how much weight he lost either because of how, the situation was. It ended up being an emergency appendectomy where it ruptured. They had to have it taken out. He missed a lot of snaps throughout the course of training camp. He had to put that weight back on. And now slowly but surely, he's finding that rhythm. That offense is finding the rhythm. And the receivers have played really well. And we all know what Jamar Chase can do. We saw that even when he might have a little bit of a hip issue that was kind of lingering with him throughout the week leading up to that Atlanta game, he still went off. He had a touchdown run where he had so much yards after catch. He said, I wasn't even really running that hard. He said, I'm stunned that they didn't tackle me. And Tyler Boyd, the week before against New Orleans, you go back and watch the tape, he could have easily had 100 yards and a couple touchdowns in that first quarter against the Saints. He ended up having that 100 yards and a touchdown in the first quarter against Atlanta. And T. Higgins always is going to be a good option for the Bengals. And he's a guy that when you look at him, Boyd, Chase, realistically, those are 3 number 1 receivers for a lot of teams. Before, the Bengals got T. Higgins in 2020 and Jamar Chase in 2021, Tyler Boyd was that guy. He was really dependable in the middle of the field, and someone who is, you talk about all the stuff he's done on the field, but off the field, Zach Taylor gave him a ton of credit for the culture that's being built, in Cincinnati. And a lot of that has to do with Tyler Boyd, and that, Zach said whenever a message needs to be relayed to the team, he knows he can bring Tyler Boyd in, and Boyd can deliver that message that needs to be said to the locker room, whatever it may be. And that tells you what kind of guy he is and how valuable he is to the team. And, when T. Higgins comes in, he gives you almost a like-for-like replacement for what A.J. Green was able to do, a guy who's got he's tall, he's got great length. He modeled his game after A.J. growing up. Then you've got Jamar Chase, a guy whose speed and power and explosiveness, you've seen it on tape. It's why he was the Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2021, and why these guys have been putting up massive numbers throughout the last couple of weeks. Now, as we go through the course of the season, there's always going to be adjustments the defenses are making. We saw that at the beginning of the year. We've seen that the last couple of weeks. And now what's going to be next? And can the Bengals continue this as things get tighter, as the weather gets a little bit colder, and they try to see, as it looks like it's going to be them and Baltimore in a 2-team race to win the AFC North, can the Bengals repeat as division champs? And when you've got an offense like Cincinnati does, and when they're operating the way they have, you look at how many touchdowns they've scored, their points per drive, their yards per play. Whatever offensive metric you want to look at, almost all of them are good. It's almost the opposite of what we said in some of these videos a few weeks ago. That's the kind of offense you need to not just win the division, but win at a really high level. You go look at the touchdown differential. The Bengals are scoring way more touchdowns than they're giving up. That defense still hasn't given up a touchdown in the second half this season. Right now, it's a historic mark that hasn't happened since the year 2000, if I'm not mistaken. And that's from our folks over at ESPN Stats and Information. So all of that being said, this is definitely a receiving core to keep your eye on moving forward. It's a group that, got a lot of hype in the offseason. Was turning a lot of heads last year. You had T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both going for over 1,000 yards. And Tyler Boyd had an outside crack at that going into week 18. And this year, it wouldn't be shocking if two of those guys easily cleared 1,000 yards when you look at it. And heck, all three of them, if the Bengals keep passing the ball like they are, could easily clear that mark. And so this is all going to be, and also one thing I got to say this, if you don't have Tyler Boyd in fantasy, you might want to pick him up. I ran the numbers over there on our fantasy app, and right now he was only rostered in 56.1% of leagues. And he's a guy who is scoring at a high clip. You see what he's done the last couple of weeks, and he's someone that Joe Burrow has a lot of confidence in. And right now you could start Chase, Higgins, Boyd. Heck, you want to throw Hayden Hurst and Joe Mixon in the mix. Those are guys that more likely than not, they might end up paying off and scoring some big points for you in a year when offense is down across the board. But, what we saw on Sunday against Atlanta and the week before against New Orleans shows you that everything that we heard about this group, all the confidence that we saw from them, even when things were going well, there was a reason for all of that. And now the question is, can that continue? And if they can, we might be talking about the best receiving trio in the NFL.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.